Hello everybody, we're glad to be with you once again for another edition of Inside Africa. We begin today's edition of the program by talking about the end of year festivities. And as some of us may know, the day that follows the 25th of December is known as Boxing Day. And the day was so called because this is the day most families pack up gift boxes and wrappings. However, over time, Boxing Day has become the day that most people use to nurse hangovers from the previous night's revelry. So is the case in Kenya. Let's watch.
Wednesday morning, the morning after Christmas. And some Kenyans were still reeling from the aftermath of an evening tipple. This man was perhaps trying to find his way home, or maybe not. Even though Boxing Day is a public holiday, others were already back at work, trying to make a living despite last night's merrymaking.
Liko smart sana. Tumerukaruka sana hapo. Tumeenda Karege, Kabatubamba, hata tumeamka bado kwa maji tu sana.
Ilishika tu kiasi na wenye walikuwa lakini hakukukosa wenye walikuwa nazo. Ndio hasa walituburudisha.
Judging by what was said by the majority of those KTN spoke to, politics and the upcoming elections is the talk of the town.
Na sisi tafadhali juu politics zetu si za kabila fulani, makabila fulani, ama jamii fulani. Politics zetu ni za Wakenya washikane.
Others were thinking about how to get through January now that the holiday season was slowly coming to an end.
Tuna survive the hard way. Unaona, sisi tuna survive the hard way. Si lazima tukule kama wao matajiri vile wanakula. Sisi tunaomba tu Mwenyezi Mungu, tuko hai, maisha inaendelea. Sasa hatufikiri mambo ya crisis, sasa tunafikiria mambo ya school fees.
At Uhuru Park, the grass was littered with rubbish from yesterday's activities. Though most Kenyans opted to stay indoors, there was the occasional Nairobi resident who chose to visit the park.
Jana kulikuwa na watu wengi sana, na leo inakaa kutakuwa na watu wengi. Hata mimi nipate hiyo fursa ya kusherehekea vyema bila watu wengi vile.
Tomorrow, most businesses will reopen and normalcy will return, at least for the next few days, before another round of merrymaking to usher in the new year.
Still in Kenya, while some are struggling to stand on their feet once again, 4 people have been killed and several others injured following various accidents around the country as Kenyans marked Boxing Day. 3 died in an accident involving a matatu along Kisii-Keroka Highway, while another person was killed along the Nakuru-Naivasha Highway in an accident involving 3 lorries.
The Metro Transport minibus had been ferrying passengers from Nairobi to Kisii, and just as they neared their destination, it is suspected that the driver lost control and overturned as he tried to negotiate a sharp bend. 3 passengers died on the spot at Bobaracho Shopping Center. 17 others were injured and were rushed to various hospitals, including Kisii Level 5 Hospital. The 3 bodies were kept at the hospital's mortuary awaiting identification. Area Base Commander James Ekwanye, who spoke at the scene of the accident, said that the driver of the minibus, which operates in Nairobi, may not have been conversant with the route that has sharp bends between Keroka and Kisii, thus losing control.
When you board any vehicle and you see the manner in which that vehicle is being driven, either at high speed or the driver looking fatigued, bring it to the attention of any police officer around along that particular route. For passengers, avoid boarding vehicles which could be overloaded.
Elsewhere, 1 person died and 3 others were injured in an accident involving 2 lorries and a fuel tanker on Nakuru-Naivasha Road near Delamere Farm. A further 6 people were injured on the same road in another accident involving 2 saloon vehicles. The injured were rushed to Nakuru Provincial General Hospital. These accidents come a day after leaders called on drivers to drive carefully and strictly adhere to the new traffic regulations geared towards curbing road carnage.
Leaving Kenya, we take you to Uganda, where the Archbishop of Kampala Archdiocese, Dr. Cyprian Lwanga, has appealed to the government to ensure that Ugandans have a sense of peace and security as the country joins the rest of the world to mark Christmas. He said many people were living in fear following the sudden death of Butalaja woman member of parliament, Serena Nebanda.
In his Christmas message to wish Ugandans a Merry Christmas, Lwanga urged the government to ensure that the truth about Serena Nebanda's death is revealed.
Sincere and heartfelt condolences on this minister, on this member of parliament. We are hearing a lot and we shall continue to hear a lot. Now, where is the truth? I can't tell you that I know the truth.
Lwanga warned that if anyone was behind her death, they should refrain from such evil acts because judgment awaited them.
People are planning evil and poisoning others for whatever reason. That's wrong. And also, I'm really appeal to government, which brought us a fundamental change, that this challenge is also addressed squarely so as to make everybody secure.
The Archbishop appealed to Ugandans to shun corruption and embrace reconciliation for the future of the country.
I continue to appeal, and the whole church continues to appeal to the conscience of our leaders and the public to do all we can to uproot this evil from our midst.
He said restlessness in the country should not be ignored and named high levels of domestic violence and the feeling of alienation among the youth, which he said needs to be addressed.
Now, businesses in Zimbabwe are experiencing the traditional spike associated with the festive season, with many small and informal traders smiling all the way to the back since the introduction of a multi-currency system. That system 3 years ago, economic performance in Zimbabwe has been more or less on the rise. However, the boom is not as pronounced owing to a slowdown in economic growth and a liquidity shortage that continues to haunt the money market.
Opportunistic traders are cashing in on the festive mood as they move in to sell products that only surface this time of the year. This season is proving to be a lucrative one, particularly for informal businesses who are outsmarting traditional retail operators by taking the product straight to the customer.
I have a shop at the Gulf Mall in the Central Business District, but I have relocated to this place specifically for this festive season so that I can make more sales.
It's not everyone who is having it rosy, however. Most long-distance companies have doubled their fares to capitalize on the situation. Local taxi operators have also benefited from the increased volume of human and vehicular traffic.
Our local fare within the Central Business District is $3 US, but now we are charging $4 US because there are many cars on the roads.
Despite an outcry from travelers for what they argue are unscrupulous business practices, they have been left with no choice but to bear the cost.
Away from Zimbabwe, business was awfully quiet at Mali's Sanctum Market, which for a very long time has served as a tourist attraction during the festive season. Events following the Macha coup have kept tourists away and left traders, most of them displaced from the country's north with no one to sell their wares to.
At the Sanctum Market in Mali's capital, Bamako, more than 200 stands with handicrafts and Christmas decorations welcome shoppers looking for gifts and souvenirs for the festival season. Now in its 11th year, the annual event offers shoppers unique gifts, including handicrafts, batik cloth or tapestry. But this year's event is not as lively due to the ongoing political crisis in northern Mali. The country's tourism industry is concentrated in the areas around the Mopti region, but today this forms the border between the government and the territory held by jihadists.
I came to the Santa Market because there are no more tourists in our village. Because of the events, I was invited by a travel agency to come here, but unfortunately, up to now, I haven't sold anything.
I don't know if it's the political crisis or something else. We are fed up. All Malians are struggling at the moment. We don't know what to say.
Violet Diallo, organizer of the Santa Market, says the aim of this year's event was to bring traders hit hard by the political crisis together under one roof and give them an opportunity to showcase their handicrafts as well as get exposure.
One of the sectors which has been really badly hit is the artisanal sector. Because when you think that in some areas, for instance in the Dogon area, 50% of people's income at least comes from tourism and especially from crafts. In Timbuktu it's very similar, and so people no longer have visitors and they are really hurting. It's a real problem for them.
In honor of the Tuareg culture and heritage from the northern Mali, a tent was set up selling different artifacts celebrating Tuareg heritage, as well as a food stand serving Tuareg cuisine. According to organizers, the profits made from the event will go towards assisting those who have been displaced by the conflict in northern Mali.
And now shifting our focus away from end-of-year festivities to something else, an explosion at a fireworks warehouse has caused a huge fire in Nigeria's largest city, Lagos. At least one person died and around 30 were injured.
The blast tore through the warehouse at 9 o'clock in the morning. Witnesses said it shook windows and could be heard kilometers away. This is one of the busiest market areas in Lagos, and people poured into the streets to escape. Some of the injured were caught in a stampede. Fireworks continued to explode as firefighters and residents battled as best they could to stop the blaze from spreading.
These buildings are stored with explosives, and you are hearing the sporadic shots in all these buildings. So that's the challenge we are having. It's very dangerous for firemen as well to go in.
The fire destroyed at least 8 neighbouring buildings. Eventually they pulled the charred body of a boy from the debris. Burnt-out fireworks shells littered the scene, some of them the size of mortars. Authorities are blaming the warehouse owners for not taking precautions.
These culprits stored a lot of fireworks like this in, and because the condition was not that favorable, it exploded.
But fireworks are a popular part of Christmas celebrations here in Nigeria, and attempts to ban them or control them have so far failed.
Taking you now to South Africa, the Natives Land Act is an apartheid-era legislation that meant blacks could not live in areas designated for white homes and businesses. The South African government has agreed to compensate more than 700 people who were pushed from their land during this time.
This is the only picture Zodwa Sinkasa has of her mother. She was 12 years old when police forced them from their home in 1960. Her friends, now in their 70s and 80s, were also affected by what's called the Natives Land Act. It's a piece of apartheid-era legislation that meant blacks couldn't live in areas designated for white homes and businesses.
It built in hatred that today we cannot, we can't solve that hatred even today, because it started by those times when we were told that we were called names and we felt inferior to them. So it can't go away.
They were moved to this township about 20 kilometers away from Germiston. There was no decent housing, water or electricity in 1960. Conditions have improved since the end of white minority rule in 1994, but these ladies say it's still not home. During apartheid, the color of a person's skin determined on which side of the tracks families live.
This was my house.
The illegal battle started in 1998. It was thrown out of court in 2005 because it did not meet certain requirements. It was then reinstated, and recently the state agreed to settle the matter out of court. Many more people in South Africa also want justice.
There's a huge amount of claims, but unfortunately it involves the bigger rural claims that must still be resolved. I think there's some claims where they haven't even touched those claims. It's still lying somewhere in a box.
The women plan to use some of the compensation to erect tombstones for friends who died before the case was won. Violet Sitola is 85. She says she's also planning to throw a victory party, where she says she'll throw away her walking stick and dance for joy.
In the last 12 months, Somalia has approved a new constitution, selected a new parliament, president and prime minister, making way for the first stable government in over 20 years. Now, the following report takes a look back at the last year in Somali politics and the challenges that lie ahead.
In August, members of Somalia's new parliament took the oath of office in a parking lot outside the Mogadishu airport. The selection of the 275-seat body represented one of the most substantial achievements in ending the country's 8-year political transition. It was followed by the selection of a new president and prime minister. Somali analyst Abdi Wahab Sheikh Abdi Samad says politically the country is headed in the right direction.
It seems right now they are moving from the transition into permanent government. Now they are starting to rebuild the institutions.
But security remains the biggest challenge for the new government. The situation has improved as the African Union peacekeeping force AMISOM, working with Kenya and Ethiopia, has driven al-Shabaab militants out of their strongholds in Mogadishu. The newfound security has brought businesses back to the capital, with members of the diaspora bringing in fresh investment after years of chaos and neglect. Mogadishu Mayor Mohammed Noor told VOA earlier this year the city is enjoying a rush in new construction projects.
Every sound, wherever road that you go, every sound you will hear the hammer and nail rather than hearing the bullets.
But although the militants have been driven from the bigger cities, they still hold control over smaller towns throughout the country. Ugandan Deputy Commander Stefano Mugerwa and his troops are pursuing al-Shabaab west of the capital.
Those past months, we were staying in town, staying in good accommodation, but now you see where they are. Yeah, it seems that there's no morale. They have no capacity to fight. Also, they don't have ammunition. Yeah, whatever they had, we are coming, they just run.
While AMISOM has been successful, Somalia's national army remains remarkably weak and dysfunctional, unable to provide security for the country on its own. Analyst Abdi Samad says without a stronger national military, the al-Shabaab threat is not going anywhere.
As long as the government are not willing to train the security apparatus, then they are there. They are there. They are in Mogadishu. They are in Kismayo, as we talk right now. They are in Puntland. They are in Somalia. They have a strong network.
AMISOM is set to begin training Somali forces next year as the country battles to make sure the progress it made in 2012 continues to hold.
Sudan's President Omar al-Bashir says he is ready to meet his South Sudanese counterpart Salva Kiir for more talks on setting up a demilitarized border zone and restarting oil flows. Negotiations between the two countries are set to resume in January in Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa.
Rebel support has been a thorny issue between the two countries that were once together. Sudan is accusing South Sudan of fueling the conflict in the north by bankrolling the operations of the Sudanese People Liberation Movement North Wing, fighting in two states that border South Sudan, while South Sudan denies this and in turn accuses Khartoum of backing insurgents on its territory. The issue remains sticky, threatening to compromise the talks as both sides hold to their position.
They're using this as a leverage to try to push South Sudan to accept, withdrawing support from the South Sudan Liberation Movement North, which they believe is supported from here. So they want to link it, make it conditional on that. But this wasn't a condition of the cooperation agreement.
The rebels have been part of South Sudan but remained in the north after the two countries separated. The two countries have been at loggerheads since independence of the South Sudan, leading to the shutting down of oil production in the south after the two countries disagreed over the transit fee. The two countries cannot seem to agree also on the border town of Abyei. The September deal between the two countries had resolved that the issue of Abyei will be resolved by the natives of the land through a referendum.
It was part and parcel of the comprehensive peace agreement. There was already consensus and agreement that there will be a referendum in Abyei for the people of Abyei to determine their future. to decide whether they want to be part of South Sudan or they want to remain in Sudan. And I think that's a fundamental right. It's a right that the people of Abyei must be able to exercise.
And now observers say Sudan is dragging its feet and may not be interested in resolving the sticking issues to stifle the economic development of South Sudan, but observe the two countries can only rise or fall together.
Both South Sudan and Sudan are suffering. If you go now to Khartoum, you'll find that the dollar, fetches almost 6 pounds, whereas in the south, it fetches in the black market. It fetches about 5 or 4.5 pounds. So the government in both in Juba and in Khartoum are suffering from these oil problems.
And so, as the two plan for the January meeting, a lot is at stake. Already South Sudan's economy is at a near standstill, now depending only on trade and agriculture across the border. More than 80% of the landlocked country's economy depends on oil.
Let's take on this one from Uganda that concerns hurt. A suspected fresh outbreak of African swine fever has killed over 100 pigs in Bobi and Adek sub-counties in the Gulu district. There have been sporadic outbreaks of disease in northern Uganda since July 2010, leading to several deaths of pigs.
This is one of the over 50 pigs that have died as a result of the African swine fever in Patak Parish in Bobi sub-county in the last 1 month. Following similar reported cases in Odek sub-county, veterinary specialists are taking samples from the affected pigs for confirmatory tests at Makerere University.
Once we have confirmed that there's that outbreak of African swine fever, what we normally do, we move back to the affected farmers and educate them, giving back to them that African swine fever, we don't have a vaccine, neither a treatment for African swine fever. It's all about control.
This is the third year running that the outbreak of the disease has been reported in Gulu and Amoro districts. Recently, similar outbreaks were reported in Chenjojo and Kabarole districts in western Uganda. The biggest worry for farmers is, however, the fact that the disease has no cure. The only way to prevent it is to avoid contact between infected and healthy animals, as well as a rapid disposal of all infected animals.
So when the locals hunt these bush pigs and warthogs, then they bring the meat home. That is how the disease gets its transit movement from the wild to the domesticated areas. And once it reaches the domesticated area, then it spreads so fast because it develops into the disease in domestic pigs and it kills them. The mortality rate is almost 100%. So wherever it falls, we expect almost all pigs to be cleared.
The problem we have, not only in Gulu, but other districts in Uganda, most of our farmers do practice free-range system of management. We're having some market here. A dead pig is being sold, carcass from a dead pig is being sold. Other pigs are even coming to pick the remains. That's how it's spreading.
African swine fever that affects only pigs kills within 7 to 10 days. Its symptoms are high fever, vomiting, bleeding from the nasal rectum, distress, diarrhea, and miscarriages.
And to conclude this edition of the program, Egypt's President Mohamed Morsi has heard the country's new constitution and urged our political powers to join a national dialogue. It comes after the constitution was signed into law by the president. Morsi says he is looking to resolve lingering tensions within the country and take necessary steps to heal Egypt's struggling economy. Egyptian lawmakers have backed the president's call with the upper house of parliament holding its first session since assuming legislative power.
A call from the president. It's time for Egypt to escape political and economic turmoil. In his first address to the nation since the adoption of a new constitution, President Mohamed Morsi urged all political parties to join a national dialogue. Morsi says he wants to resolve Egypt's political tension. And with the country's economy spiraling into crisis, he says he'll do whatever it takes to improve Egypt's finances.
In order to build a nation, we must all come together. That's why we must have dialogue. It's a necessity. We must all seek within this framework a dialogue on national unity over issues facing us in the coming months.
Possible cabinet changes and incentives to boost the economy are now under discussion. The call for political dialogue came after Morsi signed into law a new constitution shaped by his Islamist allies. The constitution won the backing of 63.8% of voters in a two-round referendum. The final turnout was 32.9% of the country's 52 million eligible voters. Egypt's Supreme Election Committee says it's satisfied with its review into opposition allegations of electoral violations. Following the passing of the new constitution, Egypt's upper house of parliament, the Shura Council, held its first session since assuming legislative power. Ahead of parliamentary elections, all legislative power will now be transferred from the presidency to the Shura Council. Lawmakers say it's time for political differences to be set aside and for the country to move forward.
With the stability created by the new constitution, we should look forward to building Egypt's future. The building of Egypt will only come through the building of institutions that are capable of investing the resources of the nation and are capable of achieving safety, security and stability for Egyptians during the coming months and years. For this reason, it was necessary for President Morsi to appoint the 90 new members to join the 217 existing members of the Shura Council.
President Morsi and all Egyptians must now look forward to parliamentary elections, which are scheduled to take place within 2 months.
With that report from Egypt, we come to the end of today's edition of Inside Africa. Thanks for hours taking our time to be with us, and please don't go away. Stay tuned for our programs continue.